G'day, this is part 2 of our video on under tray storage. We're talking about building utes. So this is a tray that we've built, modified actually, and it's got fabricated steel toolboxes underneath it. So this is a video a little bit about some things you want to consider, but as I said, part 2 of the series here. So this is principally talking about side toolboxes. If you want to talk about the general introduction to considering putting under tray storage on your ute, on either a steel tray or an aluminium tray, check video 1 in this series. This picks up from that, and we're specifically, we're not going to recover the background information. We're going to talk purely in this video about side toolboxes. Side toolboxes come in a whole different range. You can buy universal ones. That's your cheapest way in. Fabricated boxes like this are going to cost you a lot more. So when we bought this tray was used. It was secondhand. It's been modified since. See the video on modifying it in another spot. We'll cover that there. But one of the this was pretty cheap. It was only about $1,000 neat. One of the big appeals for it: solid tray, solid floor, and it had fabricated toolboxes on the side. Had a genuine Toyota fuel filler for a tray. So, but the toolboxes were a big appeal. They're not a cheap addition. If you buy fabricated toolboxes, you're going to get a custom steel tray. That's generally where you'll run into it. So you're going to buy a steel tray that you're going to get custom made to your particular vehicle. Generally, that manufacturer will manufacture your toolboxes for you to suit the tray. So they'll be fabricated toolboxes, as opposed to ones that you'll just buy off the shelf that are made by a whole myriad of different manufacturers. And they'll be a lot cheaper, but they'll be more generic. You'll find them in a whole different, previously you'd see them in a kind of a chisel design with a straight edge at the back. Now there's more toolboxes, generic toolboxes being made because people want a more streamlined finish, and they'll have a wedge cut at the back of it to taper it up to the back end of the ute, or it'll come down and then it'll be a diagonal back. You'll see those, and you'll still see those old style. It comes down across and then all the way, and then a right angle right to the top of the tray. They're probably your cheapest options, but those tapered ones are probably next cheapest, and then least efficient, at least economical, I should say, not efficient, least economical, but will be custom fabricated toolboxes like this from your tray manufacturer of choice. Now, what looks the best? Probably a fabricated toolbox, in my opinion. You get the, you can get off-the-shelf toolboxes now with the mudguard integrated, either one mudguard like this or 2 mudguards that go up and over, and you'll find them off the shelf as well, that people just buy generic ones. But if you get fabricated, you can get it custom made to the tray, custom length to the tray, and then basically fill in any blanks at the front or at the back of the tray and fill every little piece in. So basically, you've got all the toolbox. You're using all that under tray area. All that under tray area is toolbox. So the shape, these are quite high. A lot of them will go a lot lower than this. So this gives me a good rear departure angle. The tow bar is the lowest point here, and the exhaust is the lowest point of my departure angle. These are well above that, so I shouldn't bottom out on the toolboxes. So that's good. But ideally, I haven't run out of room in them. They carry the sorts of stuff in them that I want to. But, I would have, if I was getting them made and I wasn't just buying something, that had already had them made, I would have got them a little lower. I would have got them having a little bit more height in them. These are steel. Most of the toolboxes, if not pretty much all of the ones that you'll get custom fabricated, are steel. If you buy something that's been pre-made and it's just, coming out of the factory and is relatively generic, you'll get aluminium, steel, and stainless. Aluminium, like the aluminium trundle trays we discussed previously, the aluminium trundle tray will be your lightest option, so that's good. So it won't eat into your... These aren't super heavy, but they are heavy, and aluminium would save you some weight. And while we're looking for every single kilogram we can in modern use, because we keep putting more airbags and more electronics into our vehicles, more safety gear is all eating into our weight, into our GBMs. If we want to keep it as light as possible, aluminium is the best way to go to save weight. These are steel, obviously, but you can get steel, stainless, and aluminium. Obviously, aluminium is not going to rust. Stainless, if it's any sort of good stainless, it won't rust. But then there's all this crap stainless going around that will get pitting and such in it. But never mind. These have been painted in Raptor. If you get something powder coated or something, make sure your finish is good. If you're getting steel, they can get pretty well sandblasted up off the tyres and take any paint off that you've got. And then if it's crap steel, it'll rust, which leads us nicely into the next consideration. If you do get steel or aluminium, you do want to check, particularly if you're buying it just off the shelf, find a really, really cheap set of toolboxes and you go, wow, they're cheaper than all the other toolboxes I've looked at so far. Check the thickness of the steel or aluminium. It's probably thinner. And that's where you'll get people trying to save a bit of money to get a really cheap toolbox onto the market. They'll just cut down on their steel thickness. I've seen toolboxes that you could almost kick a hole in. They're that light. So check that. You want to make sure that they're a good quality box. They've got enough thickness of the steel in them or aluminium, everything. Door locks. These are all different types of door locks. These are just your push and open. You can get these type of. These are so common, this style of door lock. You can pretty much get them even from Bunnings now, I think. So, but they're good, you just push them out and they lock into place, nice and easy, but you can get a T-handle. Most of your cheap toolboxes will have a T-handle, like what my trundle drawer has in the prior video. But these are just your push release, nice and easy to open. These are unlocked at the moment, but they've got a key so I can lock them up. Rubber seal to stop the dust come in. Now I had to put a different seal on here. The old seal, it just used a bit of pinch weld that set on this lip and went around, and they sucked dust like nothing else. So I put a adhesive back seal, jointed in the middle, and it became quite hard to shut initially. Now that rubber's kind of pushed down a little bit, but it's had no dust ingress, and I mean none. There's no dust ingress in there at all, which is good. I don't want any dust in there. I hate getting dusty ratchet straps out. You've got to pull the strap through the ratchet and dust is pluming off it everywhere. So you want to check your seals. If you've just got some pinch weld on there, you'll know because these are all adjustable, so you can adjust your bolt on there, which is where your lock is. Most locks will have some sort of adjustment, even a T-lock should have some sort of adjustment. If you can't feel it push against the rubber seal, whether it be pinch weld or whatever, if you can't feel it push against that, it's going to leak dust. And you might want to think about redoing your seal. So they're things you want to consider as well. Some of them have no seals. Some cheap toolboxes you'll have a look at, there's no seals on them at all. If they're cheap, seals don't need to break the bank, but you do want to keep in mind if there is no seal on it at all, it's a cheap toolbox option, but there's no seal on it at all, or the seal looks crap, well, I'm going to have to add that to my consideration. Hinges, you want to have a look at your hinges. Some hinges are better than others. Those long kind of cheap, look like a door hinge, they're generally pretty freaking average. They bend really easily when you put any sort of strain on the door at all, and they'll bend and warp, and then the door won't shut properly. They're just crap. These are fabricators. They've got a very, very heavy pin hinge on the side of it. So these doors should, unless I really do something silly, drive along with the door open and then go, four-wheel driving and then drag it on the ground, rip it off or something, or back into something and punch it in. Unless I do something really silly, these should last the life of the vehicle. But you do want to check your hinges. Hinges can be a factor. If you're going to retain your existing mud guards, if there's mud guards on your vehicle, one thing you want to keep in mind if you get an angled toolbox design is you want to check that the angle of your toolbox is going to fit up with your mud guard. Or if you're going to take your mud guard off and just have your toolbox as your mud guard, you want to make sure it goes low enough, or there's a sufficient amount to put a decent mud flap on the bottom of it. In this case, it's probably 2 inches below the bottom of the toolbox, and then I've got a mud flap on it as well. But you just want to keep that in mind because you can see some of the mud guard goes down like this, and then the toolbox goes down like that, and then you can't, again, you're not maximizing that area. So just check that out. This is obviously only on a dual cab. On this side of the vehicle, I only have This I'm going to put, I've got a little water bottle to go in here, but I haven't fitted it yet, so you'll have to watch for another video on that one. And the fuel filler sits in here on the other side of the mudguard on the other side, in between the rear of the dual cab body and the tray. So, you know, that's what's on that side. There's a little water bottle to go in there. But on a dual cab tray, there's not much room here to put 2 toolboxes in. There's a little bit, and I have seen people put some really nifty, skinny toolboxes on dual cabs, so they've got 1, 2 toolboxes, and I'm all for that. The more toolboxes you can get on there, the better. But really, if you're going to run dual toolboxes, where it's at is either in a space cab or a single cab. And then on a single cab, you can basically run equal sized toolboxes before and after the wheel. On a space cab, you do, you're 300mm shorter in your chassis length because of the cabin, so you're going to bring it back a little bit, but you can still fit a decent sized toolbox in there and probably get your fuel filler in there as well. But with single cabs, you can run 2 full length toolboxes before the wheel arch. That really adds a lot of space. On my old single cab Hilux, an N70, and I had big toolboxes before and after the wheel, and I could put everything in there that I really wanted and never needed to put anything on the tray. It was awesome. With the dual cab, with the trundle tray, everything's kind of balancing out. It's not so bad. I've got everything in there that I want, but you've only got one of these. So, and trundle drawer versus one of these, if I could only have one, I'd prefer to have 2 of these on the side than a trundle drawer. But I don't have to choose that. But if I had a tipper, for example, with a dual cab, I've only got these, that wouldn't be the end of the world. But if I had a single cab, and my old single cab was a tipper, so I had a tipper in the middle and then 2 toolboxes, awesome. Quick tip there, if you're putting toolboxes or your mudguards, or if you're custom making a tipper tray, hard mount your toolboxes and or your mudguards to the chassis rails. Don't mount them to the tray so it doesn't tip. So when the tray tips, it leaves the toolboxes behind, because what will happen when you tip it, it'll tip up and your mudguard will get up against your tyre. Then when you go to drive off, you'll tear your mudguard, your mud flaps off. Been there, done that. So don't have your toolboxes tipped with the tray. And it's a little bit more weight for your tipper to push, but I mean, that's not the end of the world, but that's the principal reason. It's just a pain in the butt. So anyway, side toolboxes, there's some things you want to think about. Again, saving weight, aluminium's probably your best bet. You can really get these cheap, so it's gonna be largely an aesthetical decision here. If you want it to all be custom fabricated and to look, really, integrated with the side of your ute, get a fabricated set from whoever's making your tray, or fabricate yourself if you can, if you've got a metal folder and all that sort of thing. And that allows you the flexibility probably to get the most amount of toolbox down the side of your ute as you can, because you're really going to be able to maximize that space, because you can just fit the toolbox to any shape you want to and maximize the space under the tray. If you can't afford that, there's plenty of options in the prefab market. With this toolbox here, finally, this is mounted to angle brackets that stick down from the tray. Sometimes it depends how your tray is manufactured and what's supporting the floor. In this case, we've got angle that's holding the floor up, and these toolboxes bolt to the angle. Again, if you were custom fabricating something, it depends on what distance they're putting between the angle or box or whatever they're putting under their tray. You might be able to get some additional room in there. You want to keep that in mind. Final thing is your rope rail. So I like a good rope rail. I want a rope rail all the way around my ute. And with my last ute, I put toolboxes on they're just off the shelf, cheap toolboxes made of steel. And I mounted them up hard against under the ute, and they only just fit in. They only just fit in between the rail of the ute and the mount and the rope rail. I only just fit. So that means wherever the toolboxes were, I couldn't use the rope rail because there wasn't enough room to put a hook under there. And it drove me crazy, so much so that I ended up cutting a piece out of the back of it, out of the back of the toolbox, and then fabricating a box section inside the toolbox so I can move them back, so I could reuse my rope rail. I have on this tray, I have flip up little what do you call them? Loops, so that you can tie loads down on the tray, and that's principally what I use to tie a load down on the tray. I've got 3 of them, 1, 2, 3 down each side, but the rope rail is still really handy. You know, there's some times where I can't use the loops in the floor. I do need to use the rope rail. So be careful when you're putting a steel tray on. You want to move a cupboard the next weekend, and you just put these toolboxes on, but they're hard up against the rope rail, and now you can't get a hook on there, so now you can't tie the load down. So be careful of that as well. But otherwise, there's some tips for you in terms of making them. For me, you know, the customization in off-the-shelf prefabricated toolboxes are so good now, I probably wouldn't bother with fabricated toolboxes. Even if I bought a steel tray, got it custom made, I'd probably, I know how much these cost. They cost a fortune, and it's a fraction of the cost to buy a pair of them that have been prefabricated. So I would take the hit on it looking absolutely perfectly integrated, and I'd probably buy just prefab stuff and fit it in, but that's going to depend on how good a deal you can negotiate with your tray builder. But I'm not going to argue with you. The custom made ones that fit in, you know, perfectly down the side of the ute maximizes your space, and it looks generally way better. I'm not going to argue that point as well. But they have come a long way in the prefab stuff with better designs, you know, the more tapers, either the full taper or the partial taper like these ones. They look way better than that old square edge, and it really can, you know, still accentuate your vehicle, still not take away from it, look really cheap and nasty. Buying a prefab option now is a lot more palatable than what it was. But there's some things you want to think about if you're going side toolboxes. I hope this video was useful for you. Thanks for watching.